Selectors, and welcome to Curiosity Diva's deck lists. That's right, we're doing the deck lists for Curiosity Diva. The first one we're going to start with is Kyurukyu Ruuuuun. I'm gonna have to say that one slow my entire lifetime, I promise. We're gonna start with Miku Miku over here, who's an interesting card. Is Mikomiko 3 worth making a team off of? And the answer is it's probably as worth making a team as much as there are teams in your meta, right? Like, I see Miku Miku as being a anti-meta deck choice. I think that's where you're gonna get the most viability out of it. I've had people at my locals say that, though, they think it's just a good card on its own. So I might be very wrong here, but the way I read it, I don't actually love this center for what it does. I actually would play the team based on team piece. However, there might be some stands out there for Miku Miku who are heal fans or something, in which case, we're going to still try to make this deck as viable as possible for them. So if this is a deck that you want to build, I think you can totally build it. Looking at its abilities here, and I'll read it out straight for people who are driving or whatever. Miku Miku is a level 3 blue, and its auto ability is whenever this Elrig attacks, if your opponent has 3 or less cards in their hand, draw a card. If they have 4 or more cards in their hand, your opponent discards a card. So basically, if they're winning on card advantage, you're going to at least drag them down to parity. If you're winning on card advantage, you win more on card advantage. Its enter ability is draw 2 cards unless your opponent discards a card. Again, telling your opponent here that you're going to try to win on card advantage. And then its once a game ability is look at your opponent's hand and choose a card, remove that card from game. So here's where I'm thinking you'd want to end up with this. This is definitely a good discard deck, and that's absolutely a direction that you can go for it. You can also go for it being some sort of enter denial, like, right, they have less cards in hand, then that means that you'll be more able to successfully enter deny them. I don't like that it's very dependent on what your opponent does, though. I don't love those Punisher types of effects. So beware that your mileage may vary. You do not have control over Miku Miko's abilities. However, the team itself is a little below average. It's not amazing, but the team piece makes up for it in spades. Again, as long as you have a lot of teams running around. So if people were still wanting to play, for example, Card Jockey or MC Lion, as well as No Limit, then this is a great way to bring these guys back down to earth. It is interesting that this card can mess with your X players and your Deus players if they're playing in team. However, they might be able to just switch to Death Deck instead, and you'll have lost out on some value. But if they're running, for example, Xenocluster instead, then you'll be able to catch them off guard with this. So it's definitely something you can occasionally bring to your meta just to keep people, guessing, I would say. I think the best way to approach Miku Miku is with the Atomic sort of baseline deck. Atomic is going to be a thing that you guys are going to be seeing lots and lots and lots, because it's not actually all that hard to pull off as a base deck, right? As the core deck itself. It's got most of its slots already taken care of, as you're going to see here. So there's very little wiggle room as to what to make this sort of unique and your own. But Miku Miku has a few tools that I can bring to the table for it, and we'll go over all that in a second. I just want to give you guys a chance to be able to see what the deck list is written out. This time around, I didn't have time to make a cool layout for you guys to look at, so we'll just go over all the card choices individually in their own window here in a second. Now, Miku Miku Atomic is pretty good in the fact that your game plan is always basically to make the opponent discard cards, open up lanes, and try to attack through. It's very much more of a mid-range deck than it is a control deck, but it does limit the opponent's options through a pretty heavy amount of discard-focused stuff, as well as being just resilient to removal in general. starting with what we're going to do for the level 1s here. We just go ahead and size these down a bit better so we can all see what we're talking about here. We're going to start with the Yukia. Yukayuka is a level 1 that you can play on your main phase, costs 0 to grow. You look at the top 3 cards of your deck, reveal up to 2 cards without guard from among them, add them to your hand, put the rest on the bottom in any order. So this is better in a multicolored deck than it is in not a multicolored deck, right? Like, Lion excels when you are able to play it in a 2-colored deck. Yukia excels a little bit more than Lion when you play it in a 3-color deck. Luckily, this is a 3-color deck, so you will be able to do that. You also get to put 2 of any of those cards, no matter what they are, spells or anything else, and put them into your hand, which is quite nice in this type of deck. Generally speaking, look, anything that lets you draw 2 is really good, right, as a baseline, and anything that lets you do a little bit more than draw 2, aka scry 3 and then draw the best 2, is, pretty good in my book. Let's move on to the next level for Yukia. We're going to use Yukia P. Hayara. This is a main phase. Its grow cost, again, is 0, which is great. Pretty good that it's low to the ground as far as its level 2 goes. Level 2 can get expensive sometimes. But it is main phase, which means that you're not doing this on your attack phase. So you are giving up some form of defense by having this, and you got to make up your defenses otherwise. This is actually one of the assist lines that you can actually use outside of Team 2. But it really wants to be in a slow deck where it gets itself incremental advantage for going longer. And this is a way that you can sort of wait on your clap or disrespect until a little bit later. Anyways, enough talking about this card. Its utility is that you are able to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal up to 2 signi from them. Notice you can pick guards, by the way. Put the rest on your bottom in any order. And then until the end of your next turn, you can increase your center's limit by 2, which means that you can play a team of 3, 3, and 3 in order to do any of the things that you want to do. That means you can put out 3 Exias if you want in this deck, and that is perfectly acceptable. The other thing to note here is that you can also grab atomics, which will matter for certain life bursts in this deck. So it actually has a little bit of utility there as well. Moving right along, we've got let's see here, there we go, level 1. We've got a level 1 Mahomaho. I guess that's pronounced Jajon. It's main phase, level 1 with a grow cost of 0. Its enter ability is target signi on your opponent's field. It gets negative 8,000 power till end of turn. Quite good, quite standard. It's a whole way to open up a hole. It's a way to put in 1 damage. Great. This is something that you'll want to use. It's a very good baseline. Moving over to the second level, it's not so good. Mahomaho Dragon. I like this one better than its other choices, simply because it has attack phase timing. Like, just on that route alone, I like it better. It has the enter ability of... Its grow cost is 1, by the way. The enter ability of target signi on your opponent's field gets negative 3,000 power till end of turn for every card in your hand, which, again, pairs nicely with the other card that we were playing in order to get cards in our hand. Generally speaking, you're going to expect to have 3 or 4 cards in your hand. If you have 3 cards, that's 9,000, which is okay. If you have 4 cards in your hand, it's 12,000, and it's very good. If you somehow have 5 cards in your hand, you're doing great. 15,000 will kill everything. The other abilities that you can pay, a colorless, add up to 2 cards without guards from your trash to your hand. It's sort of more of an emergency button. It's good utility that it's there if you needed an enter sync and you needed to push some more extra damage. But it's not an utterly amazing thing. Again, we do have some utilities where you want to have some atomic signi in your hand for later down the line in your opponent's turn, but this is something that it's a little overcosted to do. With 3 enter, you'd rather see 3 or 4 cards. 2 enters where I'd want to be at for drawing 2 cards, etc. I think it's a pretty okay card here. Again, average. The whole team is pretty average, but what makes up for it is the different pieces that we've got as options here. So the Eternal Immortal Kyurukyu Ruuuuun. I don't know, man. This is the team that everyone's gonna pop out, ask me how to pronounce it, and I'm gonna say I'm gonna change it every time. It's got attack phase timing, and the piece can be used as a cut-in after your opponent uses a piece with use conditions team. This is the only type of piece that has this type of language. Sometimes we have some attack phase timing. It's very rare, but this has more than attack phase timing. This has attack phase timing and can be used cut-in in response to a piece, which is we can either, one, counter the effects of a piece with your opponent's check zone with a use conditions team. That's basically any team piece, not dream team, sadly. It would actually probably be very good if it was dream team, but it won't be able to counter any dream team pieces in future sets. The piece that's countered this way is removed from the game. Then you get to draw a card. You can do either one of the following. So you get to draw a card and enter charge 1 if you end up against a dream team, which at its baseline, this has always been a playable piece. Even the version of this, which is not team-based, right? This is not Chime of the Blessed Key. It's Kyurukyu Ruuuuun or whatever that one was that we played all the way back in set 1. It's a very playable piece. It's not amazing. It's very baseline, but it's okay. This does the same thing. Its baseline is pretty okay. But its first effects is quite amazing. I mean, guys, if there's anyone who's playing Aught or any of these Ancient Surprise decks and they play Worlds Reverse and you counter them with this, you're gonna win that game. Like that's how this is gonna go. Countering a Endless Punchline or a Glory Grow is always a good thing too. And if you're playing against this team, you guys should always make them do this rather than letting them draw a card and enter charge 1, hoping that you can wait it out. You should always make them counter it. So this team piece is amazing. Again, this is the reason why you'll run the deck. You're going to want to use this if there's a lot of teams decks plaguing your environment. And for what it's worth, guys, I put Ancient Surprise decks in anywhere from B to C tier, and I put the No Limit deck and Card Jockey deck still in A tier. So these are still very valid choices to use in the meta. The other team piece that we're looking at, it's not a team piece, excuse me, it's just a piece here, is going to be the Machina Guardian Dragon. I gotta practice all these names. This is my first time in it. We all know how I go with this. It's got attack phase timing, which performs the following actions. You can put a card from your enter zone into your trash, or discard a card a total number of 3 times. So you can choose to basically use an enter, use an enter, use an enter, or you can discard a card, discard a card, discard a card, or any variation of those 3 things, right? You can choose to pay an enter, discard a card. If you do, whenever the target Elrig on your opponent's field attacks this turn, you can negate that attack. This does mean a couple things. This means it stops Endless Punchline, 3 attacks, it stops Nova from doing the Komai double attacks. It also stops the prevent damage insurance that Lion has. It can also stop a double crush with Glory Grow. So it has a lot of uses here. It's almost like a backup piece for the other thing. The other thing that it can do is draw a card. It's just very strong. You may want to replace this with Burning Curiosity if you feel like you're not getting enough punch, which is totally valid, and 100% you could say that the team piece will cover your butt against most of those things, and you can run Machina Guardian Dragon as just a backup, or this can be just stop an Elrig attack, and this can be stop the team piece. It basically just, both of these things stop bleed from Elrig attacks, which is what you're trying to do. Starting off on our level 1, we're only playing 2 of these Epitam, lightly armed. We need more black sources, and we needed a Life Cloth, Life Burst, so this fits the bill. It does the job until some other better cards are going to be printed later down the line. Yes, it's not atomic, but really you only need 20 atomic decks to make this deck hum in terms of its tribal synergies. It's only got a few. GA, otherwise known as Georgia Natural Planet, is going to be a fantastic card for this deck. It's actually a fantastic card in general. I think a lot of people have been sleeping on its Life Burst. You get to draw 2 cards and your opponent discards a card. Yes, it does nothing to affect the board, which stinks, but in a dedicated discard deck, this just speeds the clock up so much, right? Like, you have access, drawing 2 cards likely gets you a removal, or gets you closer to a removal. These decks tend to draw 25 to 30 cards out of their 40 card deck, which means that they can pack less removal in general. So it's forgiven that you are using this thing, but making the opponent discard a card can just really strangle them early on resources, and that's something that you're going to be wanting to do in this deck. Not to mention, again, Atomic Signi. We've got a Mo Natural Planet. I believe we only run one of the Mo Natural Planet, and that's just because I needed a little bit more black. I was playing a little bit of white at the top end, and it mean that I needed a little bit more black. I also needed a little bit more life cloth. You could have gone full in on Epitams, but I didn't feel quite comfortable with that. I wanted a little bit more atoms just to really glue the synergy together. This ability, the auto ability, is trash. It'll never be relevant. Don't worry about it. It's like very, very, very incredibly low impact. That's not why you're playing it. You're playing it so that you can pay 1 and give something negative 8,000 power till end of turn. Again, Epipom does that for free. This, however, Atomic Signi. So it's just a little bit of a balancing act in terms of the numbering. Then we've got Pennsylvania, Natural Planet. You can discard 2 Atomic Signi. Target opponent Signi on your opponent's field gets negative 8,000 power. So anyone who plays aggro will tell you that this is a good effect. You could use this on turn 1. You definitely could. And since you're playing things like GA Natural Planet, you actually very likely could get away with running that and be perfectly fine. This is also worth mentioning that it's free. It doesn't cost enter to do the thing. It costs card advantage, but cards in the hand generally are worth less than enter. We'll be doing a podcast at some point talking about resources, and that's one of those ones that you can think of. But I value enter a little bit higher than I value cards in hand, just a tad. So this actually gets a pass for me on being marginally better than spending enter. And it's one of the few things that you actually need to do Atom stuff with. Again, because there's not a huge demand for atoms in the Atom deck, it actually makes the restrictions a lot easier, and you can play with a couple extra flex cards. But one of the cards that you're really blessed with is CE Natural Element. I don't know if there's any funny shortcut joke for CE, so if anyone comes up with any, please let me know in the comments down below what could be shorthand for CE that I can say instead of CE. But it's a multicolored. It's amazing how much these tribal synergies often live or die if the tribal signi are in the correct multicolored cards. In fact, so much later down the line in the Japanese meta, there eventually will be an atomic blue-green signi multicolored, and it pushes you even into green blue because you want those multicoloreds. At its baseline, look, it's a multicolored, helps you with your enter fixing, and it also has a 5,000 power stat power, so it doesn't get killed very easy. It's a pretty much staple. You'll want to run it. The next one is going to be He Natural Element. This is a card that I've actually always liked in the early game. Back in set 0-0 and set 0-1, I used this quite a lot. I guess it's actually from set 1, right? Anyways, it is a very good card that doesn't see a lot of play because innately Wixoss is not exactly a defensive person's game. If there was more control decks in Wixoss, you would see He Natural Planet being played more often, just in general. When this Signi's vanish outside of battle, you can down target Elrig on your opponent's deck. Just basically stop some bleed. Again, we saw that our kind of deck values this. It's a nice Punisher effect. It's also got the Atomic stat line, so it's worth playing in this deck because the Atomic just boosts it a little bit, means it's good for positioning. It's not always amazing, but again, you have the room, because you're drawing so many cards, to do things like put this as enter, or discard it if you're in a matchup where you don't think it's going to matter very much. And you can discard it to effects like BP, which I think is Black Phosphorus, Natural Element. It's a level 2, 5,000. It's new. It's a new one that has the enter ability of put an atomic signi from your enter zone to your trash. Basically, that means you're going to need to pay a colorless enter, but it has to have the atomic type line. And then you can discard an atom signi. If you do, target signi on your opponent's field gets negative 10,000 power till end of turn. This is unreal with how powerful it is. If you got this type of effect on a level 3 black Elrig, or say a level 3 black signi, you would be excited to play it. The fact that this exists on a level 2 signi is pretty ridiculous. It has a distinct cost. You have to discard a card and still pay an enter. However, if Lancelot, you added a discarded card effect to Lancelot, and then you upped it from being able to kill 5,000s to kill 10,000s, you're basically getting a lot of level 3s in pretty much every level 2 and level 1. The good thing about this means that your opponent is probably going to play level 2s on their turn 3 and 4, so you've got ways to open up lanes with this. This is fantastic. You should be running this. I don't know what else to say. I mean, like, I run Animirage in pretty much all my black decks, and that does negative 8,000, so you can tell that this is quite strong. You just need to run Atomic. Luckily, 20 is about the right number. I think there's about 24 in this deck. Moving right along, we go into our level 3s, where we have H2 Natural Element. This is, again, one of the new cards. It is a level 3 Atomic Signi with 10,000 power. It has the ability of whenever the Signi is risen, so whenever you rise on top of it, with an Animirage or an H2O, which is also coming out in the set, your opponent discards a card at random. It's a very basic effect, but it will be good when you use it, because the point is you're going to use this mostly as just a level 3 that replaces itself that also is an Atomic Signi, right? Because its other enter abilities, you can pay blue, draw a card. Again, if you don't need to draw cards because you've got plenty of cards in hand, who cares? But this, at its worst, is a level 3 that replaces itself. Hopefully you're going to get some removal. That's one of the reasons why we're playing black, and we have those early removals where you can punch some holes in. So you will pair that with this, and it will attack through and just do its job while replacing itself. Sometimes you'll draw a card and you'll find the card that will do removal. In which case, we're going to talk about H2O. Now, H2O doesn't necessarily punch holes in the opponent's force, but it just does a lot extra, and it pairs incredibly well with H2 Natural Element. You rise this on top of an Atom Signi on your field. You have 24, you're going to have a target for it always. Mostly you're going to want to target H2, but it really doesn't matter if you do or not. It's a powerful enough card on its own that it doesn't really matter. It's got a constant during your opponent's turn if this Signi has one or more cards underneath it, and it would leave the field by opponent's effect. Instead, you may put all the cards under this Signi into their owner's trash. Now, this is worded incredibly well. The way that this is worded says that you can invalidate bounce, you can invalidate board wipes, you can invalidate vanish effects, negative effects, and you can invalidate greens put into enter effects. Basically, if it leaves, right, the field, then you can instead discard the card that's under it, which you do not care about that card at this point, and it stays on the field, right? That's amazing. It doesn't even trigger any effects that get rid of it. The only, I think, leave the field by the opponent's effect. I think that even counts as excluding. Will do it. But Meat can correct me on that if that's true or not. The other auto ability, if it didn't have enough going for it, is that whenever the Signi attacks, you may draw a card or the opponent discards a card. Again, that type of effect is always quite strong. You can strip guards out of their hand, but you are pulling down the number of stuff they can do. Again, with your Elrig, right, you can make the opponent go low on cards, put down an H2, which will make the opponent go a little lower on cards when you rise on top of it, and then when you attack, they're basically out of cards, right? That's almost like a 4-card wipe out of their hand. They're not going to have anything left, even if they had a full hand prior. Not to mention, it's got an incredible life burst. Draw 2 cards, put up to 1 Atom Signi from your hand into the field. The reason why this is exceptional is because you are also playing Black Phosphorus and PA Natural Element, which allows you to, when they enter the battlefield, do something to, you pay some amount of enter, blah, blah, blah. You do removal based on that. So H2 natural elements in this type of deck should be considered as a lane filler, and also it's a 1 removal on probably a new lane that hasn't attacked yet, meaning that you can double protect your damage. So it's almost like a more aggressive Folklore in that respect. So it's very, very, very strong in this specific deck. As you can see, all of the elements, pun intended, all of the elements of the Atomic deck just run smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. And that's the reason why this is quite good, even though it's had 0 support at any point in time. Some of these cards have existed for a long time and just have not been good because there's been nothing to enable them. Now there is. And this payoff is huge. This is one of the reasons why you'd play that. We also have Honey to Ice Code Order. This is a cooking signi. Level 3. That has the team, which is we're in team, so we can play this. Its team auto ability is at the beginning of your opponent's turn. If your opponent has 2 or more cards in their hand, they can only draw 1 card total during that phase. That is pretty strong, guys. There's no, unless they get rid of it on your turn, which, they can, but you can always put it in a lane that already has a Signy in front of it, so they're not saving a life cloth, and they should use their Elrig removal for other things. This is almost always going to guarantee that they never draw a card. What's better than discarding the opponents out is making them never draw stuff, right? You can't really Xenocluster that problem away. As another auto ability, at the beginning of your attack phase, each player draws a card, then you look at your opponent's hand and choose a card without guard in it, and put it on the bottom of the owner's deck. That's very good. Putting it on the bottom means that it doesn't hit the trash, which stops black decks with certain effects. Plus, it also allows you to enable draw cards, discard a card effects, which we don't really run any of those things here, but, you can do it. It's also, each player draws a card, so you're drawing a card, right? And then you're making the opponent not lose a card, but get worse cards in their hand. So that might be good. You might spot their hand, pull a removal spell out, make it harder for them to try to get any form of reach on you when you start settling the board and making it so that way you're not going to die. This is a good, not finisher card, but it keeps you alive in that response. So you're running 4 of these. This is one of the reasons to run this team too. I actually really, really, really like this Signy along with the team piece. So the team itself is not super great, but the other piece options bring it into being viable, at least, to play. Moving right along, we can run Exias. We're white. We're only running 2 in this. There's a world where you're deciding to try to run the full 4 set because you like Exia and you're planning to go to turn 6 with this deck. And I wouldn't besmirch you for it. I just found that Exia is either very not relevant or very relevant, and I don't know yet. I don't have enough testing from this deck, and I'll rely on you guys to tell me what you guys think, whether the 4 Exia is the right call or not. But I want to make sure you guys know it's an option to do here. I'm only running it as a 2. And then to round things off, you're running a random drain. You don't need as many random drains in this deck because you are running things like the H2O, but also because you're running Honey to Ice, it sort of takes the slot of random drain. I know it's not 1-for-1 because of the life bursts, but it does the job, makes your opponent discard a card, not at random, but then also it's got a very defensive life burst, something that you like since you're trying to live this game a little longer. This is definitely a blue-based deck. And then Anamirage. Anamirage is just a pretty solid 2 of in almost every black build that you can run. It's definitely better than any of the spells they have. You also don't risk getting end of turned with this. Treat it as basically a spell that says pay and enter. Opponent some target on an opponent's field gets negative 8,000 power. It has a very good life burst. Allows you to grab something from your trash, put it on the hand, or put it on the field. Again, being cool that you can do stuff like grab your H2O, put it back on the field, rise on top of something, maybe make the opponent discard at instant speed, which is nasty if you put it on an H2. Also, you've got enough things that on enter effects, they do removal. So again, this plays very nicely with your Atomic Signi, being able to put Atomic Signi out, and then being able to immediately close down the third lane by removing something. So again, pretty great card overall. Definitely worth a 2 of in the deck. Probably not more than that because you don't want to. Plus, you got the effect that you can rise this on top of an H2 if you want to get that effect and you don't have an H2O on you. Overall, this deck hums. At least the atomic portion of it hums. And I highly suggest that you guys try it out at some point. You don't have to do this with team. You can do this with Deus just as easily. But this team itself, I think this is the push it needs to be good. Its Elrig deck is not quite strong enough on its own, so you want to backbone it with a very, very strong main deck options, as well as good Elrig deck options like pieces. So yeah, that MGD could probably be swapped over to a Burning Curiosity and do pretty well in this deck too. That would be like my big change that I'm trying to do. Let me know how you guys think of this deck, and put all your comments down below on what you like. Subscribe if you want to see any more deck techs coming in the future. We're going to be talking about literally every deck that you can play in this meta, the meta-relevant ones, as well as the new Elrigs that are coming out will all have a deck list. Thank you for watching, guys.